Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And if I may ask the committee's indulgence, I typically do not like to make a much more than a minute opening statement, but if I may have just a few minutes this afternoon to speak. We've got a lot of Alaskans here and, of course, a great deal of interest in this, and I will try to go as quickly as possible. First, I want to thank you. I want to thank you and Vice Chairman Barrasso for convening this hearing to explore the role of the Small Business Administration's 8A program in promoting economic development in our Native communities. It was about a year and a half ago that several on this dais participated in a hearing before Senator McCaskill's subcommittee to examine what was referred to as the Alaska Native Corporation 8A program. Well, in my opening remarks before that hearing, I pointed out that there is no such thing as an Alaska Native Corporation 8A program. Rather, that there are specific contracting opportunities within the SBA's 8A program that are available to Indian tribes, to Alaska Native corporations, and to Native Hawaiian organizations. And moreover, there are specific rules that apply to the participation of Indian-owned entities in the 8A program. And these opportunities and rules are rooted in federal Indian policy to address the unique challenges that face our Indian tribes, our Alaska Native corporations, and our Native Hawaiian organizations in developing viable businesses. So I welcome the decision of this committee to examine the 8A program through the lens of federal Indian policy, because we're uniquely positioned to undertake that task, uniquely positioned to inform our colleagues on the significant and unique handicaps that have historically made it difficult or impossible for tribes, Native corporations, and Native Hawaiian organizations to engage in sustainable business practices. And this committee is best positioned to evaluate how ending or substantially restricting these special contracting opportunities would affect the future of our tribes, our Native corporations, and our Native Hawaiian organizations. I'd like to take just a moment to mention a few of the difficulties that have faced the Native people of Alaska as they entered the world of business. Participation in the business world didn't come naturally to the Native people of Alaska. Alaskan Native people were hunters, they're fishers, they're whalers, they're living off the land, the marine resources, and we're not just talking about ancient times, past times. This reliance on subsistence for sustenance remains true today in more than 200 Native villages of Bush, Alaska, most of which lack road connections to the remainder of the North American continent. These are isolated, remote communities which have some of the highest poverty rates in the nation. In some of these communities, multiple grades of elementary school are still taught within a single classroom. There's no broadband internet access, very few year-round employment opportunities. And so in 1971, Congress settled the Aboriginal land claims of the Native people of Alaska, which gave Alaska's Native people title to some 44 million acres of land, but it also directed them to form businesses to help succeeding generations of Native people bridge the gap between the subsistence lifestyle, which was customary and traditional, and the challenge of surviving and succeeding in modern America. The businesses that were formed at the direction of Congress are called Alaska Native corporations. And this year we observe the 40th anniversary of the formation of the ANCs. And as we will hear today, the ANCs have enjoyed some remarkable successes, and these successes have occurred in spite of the substantial handicaps that those businesses have to overcome. Nearly all of the first generation of Alaska Native corporation leaders lacked a college education, and most had no prior experience in business, but many have earned a place in Alaska history among our state's most respected individuals for the way that they have grown their Native corporations. And today, we have legions of young Alaska Native people who are graduating from school. Some are getting advanced degrees, thanks in part to the scholarships from their corporations. Some have gone to work for their corporations and are employed in 8A businesses today. Others, like Christy Williams on my staff, an Athabascan Indian, she's cutting her teeth here in Washington, D.C. Some are working in Native health, education, social services, and some choose to return to their villages and continue the traditional. All of these roads are good and culturally appropriate. In addition to the scholarships, Native corporations are using the fruits of their 8A involvement in culturally appropriate ways, like funding special benefits for the traditional elders, or investing in cultural preservation programs, or ensuring that their Aboriginal land base remains intact. And on top of that, many Native corporations pay annual cash dividends to the shareholders. Some are paying these dividends for the first time in 40 years, and only because of the 8A business opportunity. But it must also be noted that on the road to success, many have stumbled. And even 40 years after the passage of the land claim settlement, it's apparent that some are still stumbling, but few have failed. And what's remarkable is that Alaska's Native people simply don't give up, not even when they're talked about. The spotlight is put on them by the Washington Post, USA Today, ProPublica. When they discover that they have made mistakes in the selection of business partners, they correct those mistakes, and they remember the lessons that they have learned. And when they discover that they've been ripped off by business partners, they don't sweep things under the rug and hope that nobody's going to notice. They go to court, they recover what's rightfully theirs, and they regain control of their businesses. In my view, our objective today should be to celebrate the resilience of our Indian businesses. But we must also look to how we can improve the 8A program. And to improve, we must identify the lessons of failure and find ways to help Indian 8A businesses succeed going forward. If reforms are needed to ensure that the Indian 8A program achieves its objectives, let's get them out on the table. And I want to commend the Small Business Administration for taking a stab at doing just that in the comprehensive regulations that they have recently released. If the SBA needs to be doing more as part of its educational and coaching mission to ensure that Indian 8A businesses don't fall into a trap, let's identify those resources needed to accomplish that. I thank you, Mr. Chairman. Now, as you know, Senator Murkowski has introduced some legislation which would eliminate the opportunity for ANCs to participate in the 8A Business Development Program. So I guess a twofold question to you. First of all, you've got this language within the report that SBA clearly has identified that there is valuable economic and community development purpose. Is it justifiable in your mind to single out ANC corporations that represent a single group of America's first people, say that you're no longer eligible to participate in this program, while lower 48 tribes would be able to continue to participate under the current rules? Given the statement that has come out of the SBA regs, do you think that this proposed legislation is reasonable, that specifically singles out the ANCs?
Well, I can't comment on proposed legislation, but what I will say is that two things. One, we do view the 8A program as having two distinct groups. One, the individual business owners who are in the program for the 9-year period to develop their own skills and their business, and then the community development component, in which we look at ANCs, Native Hawaiian organizations, community development corporations, and tribes in much the same way. They have many shareholders. They have a different set of goals and outcomes that, and definitions of success. And we want to be cognizant that we need to serve both those communities and have them both be successful. To your point about us recognizing the benefits that this program has delivered to many of the folks in the community development side of the house, that's why we added in the regulatory requirement that those groups report to us on some of those benefits. Now,
do you think that what you have laid out within the new regulations there, do you think that these adequately address the criticisms that have been expressed by not only the Inspector General, but the media as well? We've all read these reports that are out there. And then a further question to that is, if you feel that we have addressed that, shouldn't we allow these regulations an opportunity to work, to go into effect, to play out?
We're very proud of the regulations from both a fraud, waste, and abuse prevention standpoint and ensuring that the program's benefits are maximized for the intended recipients. We are doing an analysis at the IG's recommendation of what the growth in ANC 8A awards means for other participants. But as yet, we've seen no data that would say it disadvantages other program participants.
Mr. Chairman, Mr. Jordan, is it true that in fiscal year 2009, the federal government spent about $18 billion on contracts with 8A firms and ANCs received about $3.9 billion? Is that pretty accurate?
Total contracting to all 8A firms in 2009 was about 26 or 27 billion, and of that, ANCs received about 3.8 billion.
And ANCs represent 100,000 Alaska Natives, and there's 300 million people. Does SBA have any discretion in establishing whether an ANC is in fact, quote, economically disadvantaged compared to establishing that an Indian tribe or NHO is economically disadvantaged?
No, ANCs are statutorily deemed economically disadvantaged.
No matter where they are or what their composition are, they are, quote, economically disadvantaged.
Yes, sir.
Do you believe that some ANCs are more economically disadvantaged than an Indian tribe in all cases?
I'll leave the presumption of economic disadvantage to Congress.
Under the new SBA regulations, ANCs will have to report how Native shareholders are benefiting from the contract. The deadline was extended by 6 months. Why did you need to extend a deadline? It seems to me it's pretty straightforward.
Well, the issue in extending is we wanted to work out collaboratively with the tribal communities how to implement this. We want to ensure that SBA gets the highest quality and most pertinent data without overburdening these socially and economically disadvantaged firms.
Do you have a firm date now?
Yes, we said that we will implement this part of the regulations in September of this year. But again, as we went around and we went to 10 different cities to hold a listening tour, held 2 tribal consultations during that, received 2,500 public comments, of which we read and respond to every single one. And the issue around the benefits reporting that we heard, I personally led tribal consultations in Seattle, in New Mexico. I've been to rural Alaska. And what we heard was it wasn't a complaint with instituting this, it was a how we do it. And we wanted to make it a workable regulation.
Jackie, I wanted to ask you to respond to an issue that Senator McCain raised, and this was about the economic disadvantage as a condition to participating within the 8A program. If you can just speak to this issue, why do you think Alaska Natives are not required to demonstrate an economic disadvantage as a condition? And then a subsequent question would be, should all tribes be included in the designation of economically disadvantaged rather than requiring that each tribe proves it? I'd like to clear up the air on that a little bit.
Thank you, and thanks for that question. I'm going to start by saying, yes, I think all the tribes should have the same congressional designation that Alaska Native corporations have, being economically disadvantaged. And the reason being, first of all, just look at the history of our communities and where our communities are placed. Majority of them are in rural, remote areas. Now, if you want to measure economic disadvantage, what is that measurement? Is it a measurement about the level of community poverty? Is that the level of income that comes in? How do you take into account the access to broadband? How do you take in account the access to proper health care? How do you deal with the fact that we have such the highest number in the nation of high school dropouts, that we still have the infant mortality rates and the low life expectancy rates, that we still have the health issues and concerns? Our transportation systems are still, considered the most unsafe transportation systems. I can go on, but you'd have to account for all those things because they are all components of being economically disadvantaged. It's not a poverty rate. It's not an income level. It's a historic problem in our communities, and it's going to take generations to be able to change that dynamic. And that's why I think that, trying to do that in Alaska, where you may have maybe a corporation that might have one community that's in one of our 3 more urban centers, but the rest of them are in our remote villages. And how can you make that measurement for a region? Is not any different, and the challenging of how you make that measurement for a tribe.